The list survives only as a copy, a tired fragment of administrative memory. Names of units, written and rewritten by men who never met the soldiers they recorded. The 2nd Legion, the 6th Legion, the 20th Legion. But there is a gap where a line should be. Not crossed out, not annotated, not even explained away. Just missing. Legio IX Hispana, a full Roman legion, thousands of soldiers, an emblem, a standard, a history of campaigns, and then, at some point in the early 2nd century, it stops existing on paper. Rome documented everything. Victories, defeats, reassignments, disasters, so why is there no ending for the 9th? If the empire ruled through control and record, what does it mean when an entire legion slips out of the archive like it never existed? And what happened to the men who marched under its standard? To understand why this absence feels so wrong, you have to understand what a legion was. A legion was not just an army unit, it was a moving city of discipline, a machine designed to create order. A legionnaire's life ran on routine. At first light, drills, armor inspected piece by piece, leather straps checked, iron fittings cleaned. Weapons were not symbols, they were tools, maintained the way a carpenter maintains a saw. Then marching, miles of road, mud, rain, cold. And when they arrived, they built. Forts raised from earth, walls, towers, ditches, everything measured, everything repeated. Even at the edge of the empire, life felt structured, predictable, safe in the logic of obedience. Legio IX Hispana had existed for generations. It had fought in Spain, in Gaul, along the Rhine. Its name appears in the long, hard rhythm of Roman expansion. By the early 2nd century, the 9th was associated with Britannia, a province that looked conquered on paper but never truly felt settled. Britain was wet, dark, and distant, a place of narrow roads, heavy skies, and forests that seemed to swallow sound. The further north you went, the more Rome's confidence thinned. Still, the soldiers lived as soldiers always did. They ate together, they shared bunks, they stood watch in the rain, they counted their pay, they wrote home when they could. Nothing in a routine like that suggests a disappearance. And yet, that is what happens. The last traces of Legio IX Hispana are not dramatic, they are mundane. Inscriptions, names carved into stone, a dedication, a building project, a piece of the bureaucracy made physical. Then the record begins to thin. Years pass, other legions are mentioned. Their commanders move through the paperwork, supplies are tallied, fort repairs are documented, the 9th stops appearing. At first that silence seems almost normal. Roman records were imperfect, documents were lost, news traveled slowly, but the silence continues. The longer it lasts, the stranger it becomes, because a legion doesn't simply vanish. A legion is too large, too expensive, too visible. If it were transferred, there would be orders. If it were split, there would be lists. If it were destroyed, there would be panic. Instead, there is nothing. This is where the mystery begins to harden. Historians once leaned on the most comforting explanation. Legions moved. Maybe the 9th was simply reassigned, sent to another frontier. That theory has the shape of logic. It makes the empire feel intact. But when you follow the trail, it breaks. No clear record shows the 9th arriving in a new province. No reliable inscription places it confidently elsewhere. Its senior officers fade out as well. Another explanation follows. Maybe the legion was renamed, absorbed into another unit. Rome did reorganize its forces. It did shuffle men, merge units, and rebrand them. But Rome also wrote things down. A rename leaves a paper trail. An absorption leaves a shadow. Here, there is no shadow. So attention turns, inevitably, to the place where Rome's certainty always weakened, the north of Britain. Beyond the settled forts lay land Rome never fully controlled. Forests, hills, bog, and tribes who fought differently. They did not meet Rome in formation. They did not hold ground the way Rome expected. They attacked, withdrew, waited. They knew the terrain. They could disappear into it. If a legion marched north, the empire might record the intention. But what happens if that march never comes back? This is the moment where the story becomes less about what happened and more about what should have happened. Because if a legion was annihilated in Britain, if thousands of Roman soldiers were killed, Rome would normally respond. With vengeance, with spectacle, with a statement. A defeat of that magnitude would demand a narrative, unless the narrative itself was the problem. Here, the first twist takes shape. The most believable version of events is also the most unsettling. Not because it is supernatural, but because it is human. That the Ninth Legion marched north to suppress unrest, that it was ambushed, that it was overwhelmed, that there were no survivors who could speak clearly. On its face, this explains the silence. No survivors means no reports. No reports means no official story. But it creates a new contradiction. Rome would still know. Rome would still react. Rome would still punish. And the absence of that reaction feels like a second disappearance, not just of the men, but of the empire's response. So the theory collapses under its own weight. It does not answer the question, it sharpens it. At this point, the mystery opens into something wider, a set of competing explanations, none of them complete. The first theory is the simplest, a logistical disappearance. The Ninth was reassigned. Its records were lost. Time eroded the paperwork. This theory explains why we can't find a clean ending. It explains the messiness of history, but it fails to explain why this particular legion fades so thoroughly, why the officers vanish with it, why the number is never confidently reused. It asks you to believe that an empire that counted nails could lose track of 5,000 men. The second theory is darker, not because of what happened to the legion, but because of what Rome might have done afterward. That the Ninth was destroyed, whether in Britain or elsewhere, and that Rome chose to erase the evidence. Empires curate memory. They build monuments to victory. They rename defeat. They bury humiliation beneath ceremony. If the Ninth represented a failure that threatened confidence on the frontier, Rome could have done the most Roman thing imaginable. It could have controlled the story by removing it. This theory explains the absence of commemoration. It explains why the records do not linger, but it fails in a different way, because erasure is rarely perfect. Someone writes a letter, someone carves a name, someone remembers, and with the Ninth, those memories are faint, almost too faint. The third theory is the one that leaves the longest shadow, that the Ninth marched into territory Rome could not map, not necessarily because the land was magical, but because it was beyond Rome's ability to impose order. A legion is powerful on open ground, in formation, with lines and standards, but in dense forests, in hills, in wet, shifting terrain, a legion becomes slow, loud, predictable. If the Ninth was drawn deeper north, step by step, chasing a threat it could not pin down, then its disappearance could have been gradual, not one battle, but a slow bleeding away, ambush by ambush, supply line by supply line. This theory explains why there is no clean ending, no single site, no final report, but it fails to give what the human mind wants, a moment, a culprit, an ending, which leaves you with the one thing this story offers consistently: absence. And this is the part where the mystery becomes personal. If you were Rome, what would you do with that absence? Would you name it? Would you admit that a system built on certainty could lose thousands of men in the dark? Or would you do what powers have always done, reduce it, blur it, let it fade? By the end of the 2nd century, Legio IX Hispana no longer exists. Its number is not raised again with confidence. Its standard does not reappear in the triumphal imagination of Rome. The empire continues, roads are built, walls rise, governors rotate, Britain remains cold, distant, resistant. And somewhere inside, that resistance is a gap that never closes, a missing line in a list, not a story Rome told, a story Rome did not. Today, the fate of the Ninth Legion remains unresolved, no confirmed battlefield, no agreed-upon mass grave, no final inscription that says clearly this is where they ended, just theories, just probability, just the uneasy feeling that a system can swallow people and keep moving. When historians look for the ninth, they are not only looking for bones, they are looking for acknowledgement, for proof that the men existed long enough to be remembered. And that may be the most haunting part. Not that the Legion was destroyed, but that it was allowed to disappear twice, once in the land and once in the record. The list remains. A fragment of parchment, a few legions named, a gap where an entire unit should be. And that gap still asks the same question. If Rome could forget an entire legion, what else has history chosen not to remember? If you want to explore more stories like this, you can find them here. I appreciate you spending your time with this one. And if you'd like to keep walking through these unanswered echoes, you're welcome to subscribe.